For those that haven't met me yet, I have been at UEA now for about 7 months. It is such an exciting time to join UEA, just as we are inviting our community to stand up for their value of higher education for a better Alaska. UEA, with your help, is investing in the core priority areas that have been identified by the University of Alaska as drivers of systemic change and embraced by UAA's 2025 strategic plan. As you may be familiar, this campaign is called the For Alaska campaign. The For Alaska campaign is an 8-year campaign to raise $200 million for the University of Alaska system. And since the silent phase, donors from across the UA system have raised $135 million towards this goal. Every dollar that is donated to the UA system is counted towards this goal to build a brighter future for Alaska. And UAA's strategic priorities are to create an Alaska with a culture of education and equitable access to education, a source of relevant research, a workforce trained for local jobs, a diversified economy, which is why we're here today, and athletic excellence. UAA is dedicated to supporting Alaska's existing industries by helping them adapt and thrive in a changing world. Leveraging our Alaskan spirit of innovation and entrepreneurship will set us on a clear course to lead the way in strengthening and diversifying Alaska's economy. We must invest in emerging industries while also innovating in existing major industry sectors. We will do this through creating an environment that encourages innovation and entrepreneurial thinking through developing a new Alaska data science and artificial intelligence lab that supports all colleges and ensures UAA students are learning how to use big data to solve problems and new technologies, and by creating an innovation and entrepreneurship hub to lead the growth of Alaska's innovation and entrepreneurship ecosystem. Today, we've gathered to talk about some of the projects from across the university that show how UAA is strengthening and diversifying Alaska's economy. There are so many projects that prepare students to be industry leaders, but we only have time to talk about a few today. Our first presentation today is about Alaska Data Science and the Artificial Intelligence Lab by Dr. Kenrick Mock and Dr. Helena Wisniewski. Dr. Kenrick Mock is the interim dean of the College of Engineering and professor of computer science. And Dr. Helena Wisniewski is chair of management, marketing, logistics, and business analytics department in CBPP and is the professor of entrepreneurship. She has held several executive and leadership positions, launched and sold startups, initiated and directed breakthrough advances that included AI for DARPA, and served at the CIA. She is also a fellow of the National Academy of Inventors. Take it away, you two.
All right, thanks. Great. So once again, I'm Kenrick Mock, and together with Helena, we are going to co-present the Alaska Data Science and AI Lab. And this is a joint effort between the College of Business and Public Policy and the College of Engineering. Next slide. So this lab was founded in 2019. And even though we were founded between CBPP and College of Engineering, we do serve the entire University of Alaska system. And one of our goals is to collaborate on research, applications, uses of AI, that includes machine learning and data science. And one of the reasons, because AI and data science have really been transformative. If you think about how much you use AI and data science in your everyday life, from using Google Maps for directions, or even just making web searches, that same kind of AI technology is transformative for industry. And we would like to help introduce AI and machine learning tools into Alaskan businesses. And part of doing that is solving Alaska challenges with our industry and community partners, while training data scientists and AI researchers for the future. And what we'll be covering are some AdSale initiatives, AdSale Alaska Data Science and AI Lab, ranging from research, industry partnerships, an actual physical lab space, curriculum, and some of our public square efforts. Next. So we do have some research and expertise across our campuses and colleges. And what we're doing with AdSale is trying to channel some of that expertise and research towards these goals. And I want to also mention, we recently received a donation from ConocoPhillips for a computational cluster that we can use for some of the number crunching to run some of these AI projects. So just a few examples of some of the AI kinds of research projects that have been happening across campus. One example is machine learning for detecting allodia. That's this picture in the upper right. And so using cameras, we can detect allodia plants. These are invasive species of plants that are transported by float planes from lakes. And so we can actually detect if allodia is stuck to the plane. Another example, using a deep neural network to detect earthquake building, to detect damage from an earthquake using satellite imagery. And so that's an example on the bottom right. And here there's no picture of this one, but this is using machine learning and a database that the state collects on traffic accidents to learn the factors that contribute to those accidents. So we can actually learn what kinds of conditions result in accidents for specific locations, and we can actually go and try to improve them so we can avoid those accidents in the future. At the same time, we're starting up partnerships with other universities. We've got one we're working with University of Washington, Arkansas State, and several others that are in the works. Next slide. And we are working with our industry and community partnerships. Our flagship partnership is with McKinley Capital Management. And so they have donated some funds to set up an AdSale Scholars Program. It's similar to an internship where they set up a lab at their facility. And then we've got students that are going to that lab and learning about how to apply AI to finance. And so that's been running for 3 semesters so far. We just had a student working with Hillcorp to use machine learning techniques to try to optimize well production. And we've been working for quite a while with Axiom Data Science on multiple ocean and data science projects. So they're just a few, and of course we would love to have more of these community partnerships where we can incorporate AI. Next slide. And so now I'm going to hand it off to Helena.
All right. So where is this lab going to be located? Plans are for it to be located in Rasmussen Hall on the 3rd floor, and actually providing a physical space for multidisciplinary hands-on environment open to students, faculty, and community members. So the experiential learning is going to be aligned with our curriculum. The faculty will inspire students for new projects, but also the community members to provide ideas for projects, share applications in their industry, provide suggestions for curriculum, and learn more about AI and data science. And the plans are that part of the lab will be a gathering section where we would brainstorm ideas and have seminars. And the other part of the lab will have the equipment such as in virtual reality, augmented reality, and demonstrations and telepresence robots. Next slide, please. What are we doing about the curriculum and workforce development? The College of Business and Public Policy, I started a course, AI Concepts and Business Applications, and it's been very successful. And we have 2 certificates, a graduate certificate and an undergraduate certificate in business analytics and artificial intelligence. The computer science department features AI, evolutionary computation, machine learning, and they're developing a data science certificate. Jointly between the College of Business and the College of Engineering, we're developing an interdisciplinary undergraduate degree, AI and data science, and UAF has a computer science department that features neural networks. Next slide. The public square. I established the first UAA CBPP AI webinar series. How artificial intelligence is reshaping our lives. And we had a series of 4 webinars, and some people who are present here today were very helpful with that. And we had the topics for AI and industry, federal government, finance, healthcare, and autonomous vehicles. Over 200 participants registered for each webinar from Alaska through the lower 48 to the East Coast, and the speakers were renowned in their fields. Dr. Mock has been responsible for bringing AI-related conferences to Alaska. Knowledge Discovery and Data Mining, which was in 2019, had over 5,000 visitors, 5 million in economic benefit. There's a big interest in AI, and we're leading the charge here, and he'll be hosting a conference in September. I've been asked by the National Academy of Inventors to start a journal, AI in Education. I'm very excited about that, and I've asked Dr. Mock to be a co-editor. Next slide, please. So I want to wrap up with a few parting thoughts to leave you with. We've kind of provided a quick overview of how UAA has taken the lead in AI and data science initiatives for the university and the state. AI is significant. It's not a futuristic thing. It is here today and making an impact on the world and augmenting human capabilities in many ways across multiple industries. And that's another element that makes it exciting. Business, healthcare, finance, autonomous vehicles, smart cities, supply chain management, and the list goes on. 2.5 quintillion bytes of data are produced by humans every day. So the issue is, how do we make sense out of the data, and how do we analyze that data? So the Bureau of Labor Statistics says that jobs in AI and data science will increase by 21% by 2024, 3 times the national average. By 2029, there'll be 970,000 jobs in these areas. That also includes Alaska. And as Kenrick had pointed out, McKinley Capital and Hillcorp are partners, but Providence Hospital was also a presenter in the AI webinar to show how it was used in healthcare. We have an alum who works for Google, and he gave the presentation on autonomous vehicles. So it does involve Alaska, and we want to provide graduates with skills that are in high demand. And by doing so, we'll address Alaska's shortage of skilled employees in an importantly and rapidly growing field. So at this point, we invite you to help AdSail to be successful and solve Alaska challenges. Thank you. You could do the next slide. Okay.
Thank you, the both of you, for presenting. Okay, we do have some questions already in the chat box. Remember, if you have a question, just type it to me or raise your hand and I'll call on you if you want to ask it with your voice. Our first question, how do the experts on the call see the financial sector growing and change over the next 5 to 10 years?
In particular for FinTech? Is that the question? Is it addressing the financial industry? Or...
Sure, it doesn't say, so sure.
Well, I think McKinley Capital is a really good example of how in Alaska that's happening, because they're using AI extensively. And more you see it being employed by investment firms. If you look at NASDAQ, it's using AI to detect fraud in transactions. And there's a whole list of different applications, but that's one of the largest or fastest growing areas that is using AI. And every time I look at a financial show on TV, AI is really the hot topic, but more importantly, they're using it to help really where to place investments wisely. I could go into more detail, then I'll be giving a whole nother lecture here.
Okay, we can go on to the next question. What will the top 2 to 3 new or expanded careers be in this AI field?
Kenrick, do you want to take that one?
I guess that's a little hard for me to say because AI really is impacting sort of every field. I really can't think of a field where you can't be applying AI in data science. So that's one of the great things I think about emphasizing this area is it's really applicable everywhere. So I kind of encourage everyone should be studying in the field.
But if I
I
would,
can add, it's also been made more accessible to everyone. It used to be in the past, you had to be a computer scientist to get into it. But now you can do this with a much smaller learning curve.
yep, that's a really good point. Where I see it too being used, where I see some of the growth areas are in logistics and supply chain management, and we could see some of that with recent COVID. That's an area. Healthcare absolutely is really going to be a really big one. And then the financial industry. But as Kenrick said, it does apply to so many different disciplines. It would be really hard to predict. But if you look at some recent trends, those are some examples.
Thank you. Another question. When do you expect to have the new undergraduate degree available, the new AI degree available between COE and CBPP?
Well, we're just starting that, and so it would, at a minimum, it would be at least a year. So I would say one to 2 years. If we have our way, it would be next year's catalog in 2022, fall 2022, if everything lines up right.
And you know, directions for universities are going in, and also in this discipline in particular, for multidisciplinary efforts. And if you look at employers and what many of them are hiring, they want a skill set that combines management and marketing skills with actually an understanding of the technology. So I think the timing is absolutely perfect for something like this.
Thank you. And the final question we'll ask today, if you have more questions, type them in the chat box and send it to everyone so that they both can respond in the chat box, or we can have them email you afterwards. The last question we'll have time for: what is the greatest challenge for AI to make an impact on Alaska's economy?
So I'll start. So I think it's just getting more people out into the workforce. And so if we can have this pipeline of students that have expertise in this area, then when they graduate, they can go and start applying it to the businesses they're working in. So just establishing that pipeline of students and expertise and getting businesses to think about applying AI and data science to their operations.
And I'll just dovetail from that last part, Henry, because that's really important, and that's one of the functions of AdSale, is to also get more community involvement and have community members not only pose problems where AI could be a likely technology for them to solve those problems, but to learn more about AI and the capabilities and how they can use it actually at their organizations.
Thank you so much to the both of you. Okay, we're going to go on to the next presentation. The next one is about Geoscience Computing Lab and Industry Partnerships by Dr. Cattenhorn. Dr. Cattenhorn is a professor and director in the Department of Geological Sciences and serves as the Associate Dean of Math and Natural Sciences and Social Sciences at UAA. His research considers tectonic and volcanic processes with application to hydrocarbon systems and geohazards. Take it away.
Thank you, Samantha. Give me a moment here. Okay, so is that sharing okay, that screen?
Yes.
Okay. So good afternoon, everyone. So yes, I'm Dr. Simon Cattenhorn, and I'm in Geological Sciences as my home department. As I'm sure that you can appreciate, geosciences are extremely important for supporting the Alaskan economy. And so in terms of workforce development, we have programs within the Department of Geological Sciences that are explicitly geared towards preparing our students for the great workforce needs in a high impact job area in Alaska. And as such, our program is very applied. We are essentially trying to train our students to be able to walk into these careers already having received training in the types of software that they might utilize in various geoscience industries across Alaska and elsewhere, and also have the professional practices training that is needed in order to succeed in a business environment. So we have both bachelor's and master's programs at UAA, and our master's program in particular we're very excited about. It's the only applied geological sciences graduate program in Alaska, and as such, you can see this list of different disciplines that we try and cover within that program. But very importantly, and this message has already come across from the previous presentation, what makes us great is the research that we do in the program, because without that research, we are not engaging students in the types of problems that are really important to solve in order to be prepared for the workforce of tomorrow. So our research within the department, integrates our students into that process, and the funding that we have for that research is incredibly important, especially in order to provide transformative field-based learning for our students. And you can see this picture right here of me. Actually, that's in the East African Rift Valley, where I'm studying volcanic and earthquake hazards, which of course are very important for Alaska as well. But getting our students out into the field is very important to us. So one of the things we also know about the geological resource industry is that the vicissitudes of that industry can make it challenging to keep our program well funded and to ensure that our students are still attracted into that degree program and are ready to walk into those jobs that are very plentiful in Alaska. And in fact, in most cases, we don't provide enough graduates to fill those jobs. So continued investment in this program is really important. In terms of the research we do, we are very well funded. Our research projects are funded by the National Science Foundation, by NASA, ConocoPhillips Alaska funds our research. And something we are very excited about is funding that we receive from lithium brine mining and development companies within the United States and internationally, as well as BMW, yes, the car manufacturer, lithium being an extremely important resource going forward for the battery-powered electric vehicle industry, which is going to be becoming more and more prominent as time goes by. Now, in terms of the type of investment that we've seen in our program over the years, this is just to highlight how excited donors have been about investing in this program. ConocoPhillips Alaska in particular has been a great donor to our program. They donated a significant donation about 6 years ago to help us develop the geoscience computational laboratory. And so you can see in these images here some of the cool software that our students use with the workstations that we have in that lab. In fact, we've had over $100 million equivalent in software donations that support that computational facility, and obviously giving our students an amazing training in the types of software that they would need when they go into geoscience jobs. Some of the other support we've received, our seminar series is funded by ConocoPhillips as well. We have funds that directly support student success within petroleum geoscience, including a recent donation from ConocoPhillips Alaska to develop a field-based training workshop series, which will also hopefully allow us to engage directly with industry and bring industry professionals into those types of workshops to interact directly with our students. We've had support for our students to participate in the International Imperial Barrel Competition, which is run by the American Association of Petroleum Geologists. And in the past, we've also received support from numerous mining companies across Alaska in support of our economic geology programs. So all in all, you know, these investments have been so important for the success of our students in preparing them for, you know, the jobs that are out there in Alaska and elsewhere. And so just thinking about, you know, where this is going and why this support is so important for diversifying what we provide to the geoscience industry in Alaska, there's certainly a need to develop faculty lines to support the various emphasis areas that we have within our bachelor's and master's programs, and also just looking to the future of where the needs are going to exist in Alaska. And, you know, economic geology, or the minerals and mining industry, of course, is going to continue to be very important. And there is definitely a need to develop that more strongly within the department. But also thinking about geotechnical or engineering geology needs. In fact, a lot of our graduates go into these types of fields. And, you know, what I would like to see is a more specific training, and also the potential to develop relationships with other colleges across campus, like the College of Engineering, to develop new types of degree programs. Also, just in an evolving environmental landscape within Alaska, we know that warming is particularly impacting Alaska. Not only is this increasing the types of geologic hazards that we're seeing, whether it be along rivers or coastal hazards, but we have to understand that that could also create new opportunities. And so being at the forefront of how our changing landscape can actually feed into the economic development through the natural resources is a very important thing for us to be involved in. What's also very important is ongoing community outreach and recruitment of students into these types of programs, and particularly traditionally underserved student bodies. We have a community advisory board within the geosciences, and we have had for more than 20 years. And their guidance has been absolutely critical for our department in thinking about what the needs are across Alaska. And so we have representatives from a diverse array of geoscience industries across Alaska. And you know, we meet very regularly to give guidance on where our program is going. And, you know, just continued support for our students and for the infrastructure. You know, it's wonderful to have computing resources, but we also know that computing resources evolve very quickly, and it doesn't take long for, you know, a nice new computing facility to become obsolete. And so upkeep of those types of labs is very important. And so, you know, we look to you, our donors, for your continued support for these programs, and realizing just how important it is for our students to succeed in Alaska's workforce. And so I will leave it at that. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Cattenhorn. We do have a few questions already. If you still want to type your question in the chat box, go ahead and do that, and I'll read it. Or like I said before, you can put your hand up and I will let you talk. Our first question, what percentage of students are doing grad and undergrad research?
Well, our graduate program is now about 4 years old, and you know, we set these goals for how many students would likely enter that program over the first 5 years, and we met our 5-year goal at the end of year 1, which just shows what the demand is for that type of program. And very importantly, we had both a thesis and a non-thesis option, with the non-thesis option essentially helping geoscientists who are already working in the professional industry, but who may not have received a graduate degree in the past, to pursue that degree while still working a full-time job. And so you know, we had a lot of interest from working professionals in Alaska. And at one point we were at 22 students, graduate students within that program, which I think is pretty amazing for a new program. But in terms of our undergraduate students, we think it's really important to engage undergraduate students in transformative research experiences. And so whenever and wherever possible, we do that. Funding can be an issue, and wherever we can find the funds to support students to engage in those efforts is much appreciated. But right now, I would say that we probably at any one time have anywhere between 5 and 10 undergraduate students involved in research projects as well.
Thank you. The next question, after the 7-point earthquake, what type of work were our students and faculty doing?
Well, not everyone in the department, as you might expect, works on these types of hazards. In fact, I'm probably the one who's most closely associated with that. And, one of the things that I wanted to do in response to the earthquake that we had was develop a course on earthquakes and seismic hazards. And so I did develop that course and offered it for the first time, I think, was about 1.5 years after the earthquake. And as you can imagine, that garnered a lot of interest from students both within and outside of the major. So, that's been the main development within our program as a result of that event.
Thank you. And we have time for another question. And if you have more questions, of course, keep typing them in the box. The last question we'll have here. What work does UEA do with fault studies, and how does this help our economy?
Yeah, it's a great question. And, my formal training is in structural geology, and, structural geology really is the study of faults. And I even spent some time working for ConocoPhillips in Houston, where I worked as a specialist in fault systems and the importance for resource development. And in fact, I worked on an Alaska project on the North Slope, and I've continued to do that, working with a recent graduate student who's now working in industry. We looked at the subsurface on the North Slope of Alaska. We used publicly available 3D seismic data, which is amazing that we do have public access to that information here in Alaska. And with that, we were able to unravel ancient fault systems that date back to the Jurassic and the Cretaceous, and are actually very important for forming traps for oil in the North Slope. So there's an example of how studying faults is really important. It's all well and good to look at things in the subsurface, but you need to understand them by being able to study them at the surface and modern processes in order to interpret what we see in the subsurface fault systems that are very ancient. And so that's why developing these field-based training workshops is really important. We go where the access is. And so for those type of fault systems, for example, I have already taken students out to a region in Northern California to study an active fault system that has produced earthquakes in the past as well, but also allows us to see how those types of systems evolve that can help us understand the subsurface fault structure in places like the North Slope.
Thank you so much, Dr. Cattenhorn. Okay, we're going to go on to our next presentation now. It is about addressing economic leakage in the Alaska economy by Muhsin Gatabi. Take it away. Oh, sorry, I will introduce you. Sorry, Muhsin. Muhsin is a professor of economics at the Institute of Social and Economic Research at UAA. He regularly produces forecasts of the Alaska economy and analyzes the state's finances. His academic work uses quasi-experimental methods and is currently focused on the socioeconomic impacts of the PFD. Okay, now go ahead.
Thank you for that, and thanks for having me. Those two presentations were awfully impressive, and now I want to take classes to learn more about AI and geology. And so I'm sorry to disappoint in advance because my work is not half as interesting. But as you noted, I do quite a bit of applied work ranging from economic forecasts to kind of studying causal effects of governmental policy or entry of new businesses and how they affect quality of life, how they affect Alaskans' well-being, migration, and all that good stuff. And then we've been doing a lot of work on the effect of the PFD. Why is the PFD interesting? In addition to the fact that we all get it, it's the longest running form of an unconditional cash transfer. So it's discussed a lot when people think about universal basic income, right? And so we get calls from all over the world saying, oh, we didn't know there was this program that's kind of similar to what people are pitching now in the US and in other places. And so that's one side of the work that I do. The other side really is focused a lot on this idea of what drives economic development. Is it just creating new industries? Is it just producing more stuff? Or is it something else, right? Anybody, Alaska brings up a lot of consultants, and their favorite thing to say when they bring up somebody and they pay them $100,000 is, well, Alaska should diversify its economy, right? And so, and that's easier said than done. It's very easy to come up and say, diversify your economy. Two things. Alaska's economy is fairly diversified. If I were to put up share of jobs by industry relative to the US, you would have to squint and think really hard to figure out what's Alaska and what's the rest of the US. And the other thing that is a big misconception about Alaska is that the only way Alaska can potentially grow again, or Alaska 2.0 can grow, is if, again, we found more oil, or that if we produce more stuff. And if you've ever seen me present, I rail about economic leakage all the time, because to me, the lower hanging fruit is not necessarily to go and try to do something that we've never done before. Not to say that I'm dissuading the state from innovation. It's that there are a lot of opportunities, and Alaska creates a ton of value. The problem is very little of said value is actually retained within the state. Hence the word leakage. What's leakage is you generate value, but a ton of it leaves, right? And so we heard in the previous presentations this idea of workforce development. How do we get workers attached with employers? How do we foresee which industries are going to grow and which ones are not? And this is a little funny kind of picture that shows you what economic leakage is without thinking about an economy. What is it? Is so much value, right? And so oil revenues, tourism dollars, fishing revenues, and then you go, why is Alaska not doing better than it is? Well, because there are a lot of leaks in said bucket. Those leaks stem from a few different sources. They come from non-resident labor. If you do a decomposition of the Alaska labor force, you find there are certain sectors where the share of non-residents is 30–40%. Now, what does that mean? That means that the economic impact of those wages is just not felt by Alaska communities, meaning those people are not going out to restaurants, they're not going out to bars, they're not going getting haircuts, talking about haircuts. But so it's really one of those things where you have to think very carefully about not just how do we get more industries, but are there ways that are cost efficient of plugging some of these leaks? And that's where some of these questions come up about how do we do this best? And do we actually fully understand how leaky Alaska's economy is? And so there are two papers that I've finished with colleagues over the last couple of years that just try to say, let me pinpoint how big this problem actually is. If I say oil, or I say oil prices doubled, most of you would say, well, that's fantastic. That's great for Alaska. Yes, that's true for the budget. But in the first paper, Alex James and I, another colleague in economics, basically asked this question is, what happens to employment when oil prices increase very significantly, which is what happened in the mid-2000s. And we're lucky enough in Alaska to be able to link employment records to the PFD, so we know if the person is an Alaska resident or not. And what we ended up finding, which is probably super intuitive, is that the vast majority of the job gains, and there were a lot of jobs that got created, went to non-residents, meaning people that were not linked up to the Alaska PFD file. Now, That doesn't mean that oil development is bad or that oil does not help the Alaska economy. It just means that those opportunities could have potentially been absorbed by Alaska residents if, again, there was more forward-looking matching or education or training that would have kept some of those jobs here. We know that people that are residents spend more money in the community. We know they invest all sorts of resources, donate to the university. And so to me, that's a classic case of a framing problem, right? And so most people love that splashy headline that says firm A created X number of jobs. And to me, the way we should be thinking about it is who benefits from the jobs, right? And so to whom are the benefits accruing? And that's really a lot of the things that I'm trying to do is unpeel that onion, better understand the channels through which dollars actually enter the Alaska economy, and how can Alaska get better at capturing some of those dollars. The second exercise goes from oil to commercial fisheries. And we basically say, let's try and actually estimate using empirical causal inference, how much do communities benefit from the fluctuation in fish prices? And again, we find that there is a big effect. It varies wildly from place to place. But again, unsurprisingly, the places that benefit most are the places where the resource and the labor is local. Because if you have a plant that's, for example, owned by residents, the money that's generated from that plant is much more likely to be spent locally. If you have labor that's local, those people are much more likely to spend some of that labor. And so again, very, very intuitive, but I think what this work highlights to me is the importance in doing an inventory of where are those leaks, understanding that while we speak about an Alaska economy, there are multiple mini economies across the state, and we need hyper-localized efforts to better target how do we potentially keep more of this money in order to set these places up for economic growth. And then that's where this coordination effort comes in, right? And so if we know we have these leaks and we're importing a lot of labor, is there a way for the university to step up and to potentially coordinate? Now, the big challenge is that we've obviously been in the midst of a massive financial crisis. We've been making very myopic decisions. And so having that long runway to invest in the long run has been very challenged. And fixing these structural questions requires a long runway. My overarching point is there are a lot of ways of doing economic development, and potentially starting with trying to capture the value that's leaking is not a terrible place to do that. And these are just, again, some pointers about how to do these things, right? We're all thinking right now about the massive economic crisis we're experiencing. We're in the midst of a pandemic, but people forget that we came into the pandemic with a very weakened economy, and that we have not really recovered from that 2014 oil price decline. So the questions right now are not just let's hope to get back to pre-pandemic levels, but what is Alaska 2.0 going to be? What are these new economic drivers? How do we keep people here? How do we train talent? How do we invest in quality of life? And to me, a lot of these things start with let's identify where the value comes from, do a good inventory. Let's make sure that those leaks are plugged as well as possible. And again, I don't want to say that requires a clockmaker or a coordinator, but it kind of does. And the state, the university need to be speaking to industry, to regions, to kind of better understand what's going on. So I'm going to stop railing. Feel free to reach out and ask questions or ask about anything else. We're doing a lot of interesting work. I'm just giving you a brief overview of an area that I think is fascinating.
Thank you so much, Muhsin. Okay, we are running over time, so I'm going to ask one question, and if there's any follow-up questions, please email me. My email is skSINK alaska.edu, and I'll make sure to forward the questions and get back to you. So I'm so sorry, Musti, but
No.
the one question that we will ask today is Alaska unique in dealing with this leakage issue?
Not unique, but our non-residential workforce is much higher than in just about every state. So yeah, leakage is an island economy problem, meaning that the Hawaiis of the world also deal with it, but it's very, very high in Alaska, especially because we need specialized workforce and we're a small state in terms of population.
Thank you so much to everyone that presented today. These were absolutely fascinating, and it's so great to see, even as a staff member, to see what UEA is doing to ensure that our state has a vibrant future. Thank you for everyone that joined us as an attendee too. It's so nice to see you, and we look to hear from you soon. Have a nice day.